Yeah, I'm gonna try and get right on something about the content that I previously talked about, and I just want to talk about something about the um, the being venue. According to the information that's available, how true it is as a constant or the consistency, what only seems to be whatever. I mean, if it's just a duration of available information, or a specific chosen duration. I mean, if it's something, I'm kind of like wondering, even with like WIA International. I mean, as huge as my perception is as it is, or you know, it's almost like whether or not if it's going to be a duration of like intellectual in the way of what degree of only what opportunity is, maybe to WIA International itself. How true it is, I'm not sure, but or what programming, or uh, what legal tender means to like programming codes in the way of some analytical you know um, perception of what the tender ultimately leads to is some programming code that way, and the legal tender and it equates to like right at 200. I'll have to think about it, but anyway, like programming legal codes, legal tender, like the note being legal tender for all that both of but the thing is that if that ultimately gets to it seems to me, when I realized that something about the intellectual property would involve, the value of what would be considered royalties. In one way, might be considered maybe a registered charity in another, or annuity in another way. It just really depends on um, what type of distribution would actually define its meaning based upon its source or point of origin that way. And it's kind of like something in my mind about I've been focusing quite a bit on the litigation being not necessarily de facto in a way, and and it really ultimately is getting something in my mind of like a Chase Practical being, the alphanumeric value of 140, and the word itself alphanumerics, and Sarah, and biblically referring to the King James Version Bible as compared to some information that would be, the American thing as compared to, the perception of, the Book of Mormon, Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, and some of the information that would even lead the thought that would be something of the love triangle, ultimately getting to, what the schematic would even suggest to like Oldsmobile Delta 88, and what the Delta Force is to the uh, explanation of it gets to a cycle of information. It's unreal. But anyway, yeah, I was thinking about that because somewhere in my mind, Sarah is ultimately getting to something about the 10th. Yeah, as a matter of fact, so that's like a 59, okay, and ultimately by the most, the minimum requirement in my mind of the three methods of simple basic computation of that symbolic representation on the back side would be 58. Ultimately, what even would be, the same letters of the Hot Cafe McDonald's Club. I mean, a McDonald's coffee cup, excuse me. And alphanumerically, all the possible combinations of like the symbolic representation joined together, individually, together, and all together at once. It's like three methods of like simple addition. With every possible factor and combination that way, which is really just really three, really, that gets to the deal about 58, and the one deal about the basics of like electronics and calculators with the 0 point E, and the unity without the point in that way, almost symbolic with the one eye on the back side, and that there's another one, but in retrospect, but likewise for like Texas Instruments calculators, it gets to the EE. And whether it's an error or just simply, either way it goes, the EE will pop up if it's beyond, the software engineering design, in this particular case, like calculus, in any scientific notation, whether it's an error or beyond, um, the way it's designed for the software, the EE will pop up, and that horizontal line, it seems like it would be like almost European in a way of what the euro dollar is to the dollar, involving, not limited to the international electrical electronic engineering and symbolic representation that would reflect a standardization in the way of the IEEE, okay, being like the 24 thing, or Homeowners Association, or General Motors Acceptance Corporation, and GMAC. And it ultimately gets to, the thing that I've been referring to in several factors, and that seems to be like how business and corporate law is kind of like overseeing the fact of like what seems to be, pretty much the North American Free Trade Act, the NAFTA thing. And it just seems to be, what available information and what is chosen and accomplished, and as far as like availability and the freedom to actually accomplish, what would more than likely, require travel in a way of having the right to assemble, maybe beyond, just a residential area or a civic club, or what would be chosen as a location, what would represent, the factor of organization, if not, the venue itself, and what that is to international organization, or or just the or a unionized type of assembly in that way, or the General Assembly itself. And that's really what I'm referring to. And the thing is that if the Free Trade, North American Free Trade Act is just really representing, simple terminology and methods of banking, or and I've been focusing on the early retirement, the ERISA statute that seems to be like, I've been really focused on it because of, the alphanumerics of 52, and what a VPN is to Vice President Network, or via Plenipotentiary Network, or and the factors of the heartbeat of America, and all kinds of things about that. But it seems to be that the early retirement, and the acronym for the ERISA, I mean, it seems to be like the early investment, of securities annuity. I mean, when it's the acronym, it seems to be like, ultimately, it in my mind, it ultimately involves the separation between church and state at the level, to where, if it's going to ultimately get to, the separation between church and state, and I've been focusing on the Israeli flag, the Star of David, and the 6-point star being the 103rd day, and the telepathic angel, and all that code blue, as compared to the night vision and the bird. Ultimately getting, beyond the religious factor of, like, the in God we trust, and how the U.S. dollar identifies that, normally so, truthfully so, in that way, that represents, in my mind, obviously, the alphanumerics 175, or a telepathic Air Force, or, in intermediate air, like Pearland High School, and some alphanumerics of the 175 thing, or, a telepathic capital in that way, and what that is to human capital, or what it is not to a storage area network, or securities and annuities network, what human capital is, or, in my mind, ultimately it gets to the, what the whole entire point of, like, the social being, the North American Free Trade Act as a social security, like an early retirement, would only be, itemizing, categorized, I don't know if I would really call it monopolizing, although monopolizing anything would, almost be like having a right to assemble, what would be define whether or not if it's actually control, or the willingness of or through neglect based upon lack of experience, or what the real situation is about it. Monopolizing normally, it's really like the deal about real estate, and if that's ultimately getting to what is residential and residential neighborhoods in that way, or what even apartment would really truthfully represent. Likewise, in addition, really pretty much given the same principles that way of like of having a right to assemble, yet naive to the fact of the principle itself, and the structure itself. But really, if it's ultimately getting to a method of banking that way of what the ERISA statute would only suggest, based upon maybe if it's ultimately getting to the free trade is a non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, below the thought of a business law and corporate law in that way, or going beyond the executive class into the expenditures, what that seems to be, involving, a little bit more than enforcement, and in my mind, it seems to be, involving the international banking systems, and the current resident. It seems to be more and more apparent that the current resident is a little bit more than, the thought of terminology that you see on television involving, like residency, normally involving, the thought of med students, required as a residency in a hospital. And it doesn't really suggest, anything other than potentially, in my mind, the way I see it now, as the degree level of opportunity of like not being in control of a source of funds, or its own duration or destiny, or something that would reflect managing factors, that would include they themselves in a way, and likewise in addition, uh, and in that way, even what that would represent in circuit of the aggregates involving monetary, domestic, and gross national product that way. And the way I see it involving maritime law, it seems to be ultimately getting to the real deal about whether or not, if it's going to be the real issue of an experience of that defines the meaning of what international law is, of international banking systems, just being born into the thought of like having all answers like already, of like the airborne of the Air Force, and what that is to amphibious, or what it is not being of any significance in any lifespan, or any known fact. It's once again, it seems to me like it gets to the pi r square factor. I mean, it's like, the formula, everyone knows that it works, and you know that you're looking for something that that's there, and and with a given that's used, and that being there, and knowing to find the remainder of a known proven fact of how it's found, and it ultimately gets to the real point of the fact of what airborne is to the Air Force, or amphibious is in a way of and I want to say this real quick about something about the alphanumerics of subliminal message being 177, mental telepathy 177, or what that is to, like, in my mind of national security. I was getting on that a little earlier, but national security, focusing on like telepathic communication as compared to like telekinesis, and it seems to be like the real big deal about as American as hot dogs and apple pies thing, and it's kind of like it really is like the "In God We Trust" thing, in a way of really it's phenomenally not funny, in the way of what a Corvette would really even suggest. What it really suggests is even I don't know. I mean, if it's ultimately something that would reflect a chosen preference. I mean, if it's a form of entertainment, or just compatibility, or what that is or is not, or in the way of having fair use, or designed in a way to represent symbolic participation that would even suggest that even evolution beyond the front lines of the beachfront would be something more of a science than trial by error, or a medieval periodic error, and proven fact. But anyway, I'm getting off track here real quick. But the thing with this is that it seems to be that the whole point about the as American as hot dogs and apple pie, it ultimately gets to the pi r squared, and what the pie chart is to a percentage as compared to import and exporting, which is not necessarily a pie chart at all, or the spelling, being 30 of like a pie chart, normally involving business laws compared to international law, of plain horizons that way, of what ultimately gets to internet protocol, or the IP address as compared to the PI, and the pronunciation of the symbolic representation, the PI, the pi, and the 3.1416. And it seems to be like all that stuff about empire, in that way of something about the, in my mind, the three axes of Audi. And it's just, I'm going to have to take a break here real quick, because I'm getting real broad and branching out in all different directions. But yeah, I was kind of like focusing on that American Free Trade Agreement and the recent statute, because it seems that anything under it is kind of like non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, would be almost like a release of obligation at a daily method banking in that way. And likewise, in addition, I mean, I'm going to take a break right here. I'm going to probably not even upload this, but I'm going to take a break. I'm getting to that point, okay?